Hello and welcome to the third video in the Conform Assist video series. Today we're going to be having a look at setups and creating a scene. The first thing that we're going to look at is a thing called Baselight Setups. Setups is a standalone utility program which can either be accessed from within Baselight, from this menu here, or you can double click the icon and access it in its own menu. So if I click here, you can see we have the setups editor here, down here. As you can see, it's got a huge range of setups that we can choose from. And if we go ahead and click this show editor button, you can see all the settings used within the setup. In terms of this music video we're conforming, it was shot at 25 FPS and it was shot in HD. So this is the option for us. If I choose a frame rate here that is not the frame rate of my project, I might get stuttery playback, the sound might not be interfacing properly, I might get jumps in the sound, it just won't work smoothly. Also, a thing to note, over here in the New Scenes tab, you can define what settings are used when you create a new scene, or the default settings when you are using this format. So, for example, because I generally work in ACES, I could choose the working color space for ACES, and then from now on, whenever I create a new scene in this format, it would use these settings. I've just made a change here, and as you can see, it's modified. So to save that change, I'm going to hit the save, and then I can quit the setups editor. A thing to note here, when you make any change or when you try and activate a new setup, so say I was working on a 24p project, and I hit activate setup, even though the green tick is here, you need to restart the Baselight to activate the setup, okay? So if I just close this editor and continue to work in Baselight, nothing would have happened. So really key point here is when you do make or activate a setup in Baselight, you've got to restart your Baselight in order for the changes to take effect. So I've saved my change here, and I'm going to quit the setups editor. Again, if we go into the Baselight tab and hit the setups here, the same menu pops up, okay? So note that you can access it from the setups menu, or you can access it from your standalone icon. So that's the setups menu. We've got our HD 25p setup activated, and we're gonna go ahead and quit the setups editor. So now we're gonna go ahead and create our project. So if we go up to the views menu and job manager, we're gonna go ahead and in our tutorials job, we're gonna create a new scene. We're gonna keep our working format as 1920 by 1080. I always like to keep my working format and the output resolution of my deliverable. You cannot change the working frame rate once you've created your project, so make sure you get this right here. And as stated before, I'm going to go ahead and choose AP1 as my working color space. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to close the job manager. A couple of things to note when you create a new scene. So if we go into the scene setups here, which is views, scene settings, we can see that we have this menu. So a couple of things to note when you are preparing a timeline for a conform. So the first thing to note is the start time code. So if you're conforming a feature film, it's important that you sync your starting time code to the offline reference that you've been provided with from editorial. Jumping along to the format and color tab, one thing that I didn't mention actually in the color management video is this DRT. Okay, so the DRT is a big part of the color management workflow in Baselight. So even though we've selected our working color space as ACES, this DRT, this display rendering transform, has a big impact on how your images will look during the grade. Okay, it adds a certain tone curve to your final outputs, and you can see this while you grade. So quite a fun thing to do when you start a project, and you're playing around with a few grades. Definitely have a look to see what these different options do to your image and see which one you prefer. When I'm working in ACES, I tend to use one of the ACES DRTs. So in this case, I tend to gravitate towards the ACES RRT 1.0.1. The colorist will probably have a preference on his DRT, see what he wants his color management settings laid out as. The next thing to note is the scene audio. So if your offline reference doesn't have audio embedded, you can attach a movie file or an audio file. So if we click File or Movie, we can see that we can browse for a file here. We can offset the file, and we can also adjust the volume, okay? The last thing we're going to talk about in the Scene Settings tab is the image container. So the image container or scene container. Baselight uses the scene container as a root for all media file paths within the scene. So let me give you an example. If we go ahead and open up the Flux Manager, the browser, Control B is the shortcut there. And we navigate to my hard drive. And we just insert any one of these shots. Insert sequence at cursor. So, okay, here we go. This dialog box is saying that this movie, which is located on my hard drive, is not within the scene's current container. And do I want to change the scene's container to my hard drive? So if I go change, and if I quit my browser here, you can see that in my sequence file path in the parameters view, it has replaced my hard drive with %C. Okay, so %C is the expression for your scene container. So if I go to my scene settings, you can see that our scene container has been changed to my hard drive. So this %C and this volumes and my hard drive location is now interchangeable. These two mean the same thing. Okay, so it's good to know that if I change my scene container now to anything else, to my local file system, for example, my media is going to go offline. It's now looking for this path within my local file system, which doesn't exist. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my container back to my hard drive. And as you can see, my media jumps back online. And just to be very transparent, if I go ahead here and copy this path and replace this %C, nothing changes, okay? So that's a couple of things to keep in mind when we are setting up our scene. So again, just to recap, before you create your project, make sure that your Baselight setup is correct for the type of project that you're working on. Again, you can access that from the setups menu or the standalone utility program. When you create your scene, we have to look out for our starting time code. We have to make sure that we've set up our working color space and DRT correctly and how the colorist will want to grade. We can attach audio if there is any. And we need to be knowing what our scene container is for any given project. But that's it really. Next video, we're gonna take the scene, we're gonna duplicate it, and we're going to start our conform. Okay, so that's where the real fun begins. I'm gonna make the assets that I use in the next video available to download in the YouTube description link. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for the next video, and you can potentially download the assets that I use and follow along in Baselight if you want. Yeah, it's going to be a good time. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.